my co-host, Dan Freshley. Dan is my partner here at Solar Surge and Solar Surge University. He's also the CEO at Radiant Solar, which is one of the larger independent solar sales companies operating up and down the East Coast. So Dan, welcome back. It's good to be back in studio here with you.
Yeah, good to be back here and looking forward to a lot of that content from last week making its way out into the world. So coming soon.
Yeah, it's going to be some cool things. I mean, one of the things that I got to do is actually visit Q-Cell's manufacturing plant just outside of Atlanta. So Q-Cells, in terms of market share, Q-Cells is the #1 solar panel manufacturer. And so we did a whole week-long video project with them talking about a number of different areas of their business, but also really like getting like behind the scenes inside the factory view of how these solar panels are actually made. They've got a facility there that's cranking out about 12,000 solar panels a day. And it's almost fully automated. It's really, really exciting to see. So we'll have that coming out for you guys on the main channel here in a future video. But for today's video, guys, the topic is how do you kill the bill in solar sales? And so when we talk about kill the bill, what we're talking about is how do you articulate exactly just how bad the situation is if the homeowner sticks with the power company, where they have no control over future rate increases, they have no control over inflation, they just have to pay whatever they tell them to pay, or they turn the lights off. And so before we present any kind of a solar proposal or a solar solution, you first want to frame the conversation with this kill the bill. Let them know how bad it is, what the cost of doing nothing is. And then, of course, you can get into your presentation, and then relatively whatever price you present to them, you know, Dan, we've said it many times before, like whatever we propose, right? Whatever we propose as a solar option is better than sticking with the power company.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
By the way, folks, the reason we do the live stream is so that you can ask your questions in real time. So if you're on YouTube, if you got the chat feed up, or if you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, you can just post a comment on the post here, and we can put it up on the screen, and then we'll do our best to get answers to you in real time. But as we get into the topic of today, Dan, so kill the bill. Dan, why do you think it's so important that you really explain to the homeowner how the current deal with the utility company works and how bad it is before you go into your pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the first part of it is just simply from an economic, perspective, right? If you're making the comparison, if you're a sales professional, you're always going to support whatever it is you're selling or whatever you're offering in, an economic justification of some sort or of some kind, right? I do firmly believe that ultimately people don't make buying decisions just strictly based on price and economics, but they'll have an emotional reason and they'll support it with a financial, logical, economic type, calculation. So I think what we're doing essentially is in the first part of the meeting, in the first part of the conversation, we've already kind of got that emotional conversation started, right? We've already started, hey, maybe they're looking into solar because emotionally they believe it's the right thing to do from an an environmental perspective, or emotionally they think it's the right thing to do from I'm sick and tired of my utility company, or they want backup. I'm tired of, that inconvenience that happened to me when I lost power, right? So there's typically some sort of an emotional trigger or a root cause or like a root, problem they're looking to solve to get started. But then again, knowing how buyers buy things, they're going to try to find ways to justify it, economically. So the kill the bill conversation really hits both of those things on, nail on the head. You're feeding into that emotional desire, right, to kill the bill. I already didn't like my utility company. So you're feeding the emotions of that a little bit more, not for manipulation purposes, but just out of, look, this is just the sheer reality. This is how much money you're spending on the utility company. You already don't like the utility company. Well, here's more of the reason why. This is what you're spending now. This is what you have spent. This is what you will spend. But then there's also the economic side of things where you're both making a legitimate argument, but you're also supporting the emotional issue they had with the utility company with the financial justification that they were ultimately going to make as to why they were or were not going to do the solar project. So a lot of times when I'm having that conversation and I'm explaining the kill the bill, right? I'm not really calling it that, of course, but that's really what I'm doing. I'm helping them to understand, look, this is what's happening. This is the state of affairs. This is where you are today. This is how energy rates have increased historically, right? I'm using a pretty conservative number. We generally are using 4% here, which is the data from about the 1980s to 2020 across the country. But then I'm also probably going to pull something up that's a little more relevant to the current state of affairs, or where things have gone since 2020 to 2023, 2024, right? Which in a lot of markets, average cost increases have been over 10% per year since 2020 due to a variety of different factors, right? And there's an emotion, again, that goes into that. So you're kind of balancing this emotion and financial logic justification, and you're not trying to overdo it, because then you come off just like a classic salesperson, right? Like, people know when you're getting sold to in that type of way, but you're feeding the emotion, you're justifying with logic and finances, feeding the emotion, justifying. And this is kind of this back and forth that is occurring during that kill the bill. And I feel like the deals that I've had over the years, Joe, that have gone the best, if it was like the most, lay down sale type of thing, it's because of the kill the bill emotion and justification that occurred, where people got so fed up, where I've heard people say things like, you know, uh, just like almost like they want to make threats at their utility companies, right? And I'm just like, in my mind, I'm like, great, don't ruin this opportunity, Dan, because this one's a laydown. Like, you will sell this one. Don't say something stupid, right? Because they've already convinced themselves that they hate the utility company. Anything I could show
Yep.
them would be better. And sometimes, I mean, you've probably done it long enough, Joe, too, that sometimes I show them something where their cost increases, their monthly payments go up in the short term, right? In the short term, they might swap a $200 power bill for a $240 solar payment, but they're still looking at it like, I still win because I own that. It's mine. I control it. I don't have to worry about someone else telling me how much I got to spend, because my bill might be 200 today, but it could be 350 tomorrow. And so anyway, that's a lot of what I'm trying to do during that sort of kill the bill phase.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you hit on a number of really important key points there. The first is that people buy emotionally. There's always some kind of an emotional motivation there. The way I've remembered it is people buy emotionally and then they justify it to themselves rationally, right? So they have a feeling that they want solar, whether they think it's cool, they believe in saving the environment, or they want to stick it to the power company, whatever it is. But there's some feeling there that they want it, and then they need to justify it to themselves, or kind of sell themselves on the idea that, okay, if I make this commitment, it is going to pay for itself over such and such a time. I'm not being irresponsible with just, impulse buying, that there actually is an investment return here. There's a financial justification here. But all of that feeling starts with some emotion. And so,
Mhm.
with the goal of kill the bill, the way I think about it is, you need to explain just how bad the situation is, to the point where the homeowner frankly feels disgusted with the idea of just sticking with this any longer than they have to. I mean, buying your electricity, the way we buy our electricity is unlike the way we buy almost anything else. I mean, imagine if there's only one guy in town, that's allowed to sell you this product, and he tells you what the price is, and you pay it. If you don't pay it, they just shut the lights off in your house. And that's basically what it is, because it's not like, unless you're in Texas, right? Texas is one of those rare deregulated markets where you can just switch electric companies if you don't feel you're getting the best deal. But for the other 95% of the country out there, you basically have one power provider, and you're used to that. That's all it is. That this is the one company that gets to provide you electricity. You pay whatever price they tell you to pay, or they turn the lights off. They leave you in the cold, and you have no control. And there's no dignity in that process, right? That's not a free market process. It's a monopoly, right? And so, but people have been accustomed to just accepting that for so long that they're kind of conditioned to it. So when you unpack that at the beginning of the sales presentation, really what you're doing is just letting the prospect know just how bad the situation is, just how little control they have over the situation. And even though in most cases we can't get rid of the power company completely, we can at least change your dynamic with the power company to where you have much more control and custody over where your energy is coming from, what it's costing you, and whether or not you want to use them for some of your energy needs. Or in some cases, you have solar and batteries. You don't have to really use them for any of your energy needs. They can just be sort of the provider of last resort if some reason your battery is drained out. But I do think that's important. Get those emotions exercised, right? That angst that the buyer has towards the power company, that feeling of uncomfortableness that they have with their current situation, you do kind of want to fan the flames a little bit, right? And then of course you're going to offer the solution. Hey, here's a better way of doing it, right? So here's a better way that I can show you where you can have control over the cost, over where the energy is coming from, and so you can more take or leave the power company on your terms, not their terms.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'll
One of the
throw it
things
back over to you.
one of the things I like to do too, Joe, when we're in that, and again, it's you as a sales professional, hence the big professional part of it, right? We're not trying to play into these games and just weird sales tactics, right? But in many ways, you're sort of mirroring, right? And that's a principle in sales that a lot of people have heard before, is this idea of you mirror the posture of the prospect you're working with. If they're sitting forward, you sit forward. If they're sitting back, you sit back, arms crossed. Maybe you cross them and then you unfold them to show like, hey, open up. And so you're kind of doing a similar thing here in your dialogue. You're kind of mirroring their intensity or their emotion with how they feel about their current situation, right? And sometimes they're going to be very stoic and very kind of status quo, and you got to figure out a way to, how can I pull a little bit of emotion out here so I can find something that will help me with the sale process, right? So this is just professional sales, right? But on the topic of solar, one of the things I know I've done before, especially a lot of the utility companies that I've worked with here on the East Coast up and down that are investor owned utility companies, they're publicly traded. I'll go on a little bit of a spiel about, well, hey, look, at the end of the day, a company that's publicly traded, their number one value, their number one customer, if you will, is their shareholders above and beyond everybody else, frankly, right? They might offer a service, right? Like let's take in Virginia, Dominion Energy being one of the largest utility providers and the largest in the state. Dominion Energy is a publicly traded utility company. And so, yeah, like you would think, hey, their product, their service is utilities. It's electric, it's gas in some places, things of that sort. But truth be told, their number one customer is not their power bill payers. Their number one customer is the shareholders that they are responsible for returning dividends to, and increasing stock value and things of that sort. That's why there's a board of directors. That's why there's a CEO. That's how they get evaluated, right? Is how well does the company do financially? So the reality of it is I'll explain some of that, and I'll also go into talking about, and this is part of that emotions. I might pull up an article that shows how much did the CEO of Dominion Energy get paid last year? How much did so-and-so earn, right? Because the reality of it is energy rates have continued to rise, not just here in Virginia with Dominion, it's across the board everywhere. That's just a relevant example. And I might show, look, at the end of the day, I'll encourage people, look, at the very least, if you're going to pay a power bill every month, at least be an investor in this company too. So you get a kickback from the money you're giving them that they're just going to end up giving back to you, right? And so I'll kind of make like joking conversation about all of that during the process. But again, trying to kind of stoke the emotion of that a little bit more, just to make it clear as day. It's a monopoly. And it's, in my opinion, the worst kind of monopoly. It's the monopoly where they provide a service that everyone has to have. I mean, it's borderline, would be life threatening, right? If you did not have utility services, and yet they dictate the price. You can call it regulated, but let's also be real, who, depending on people's political conspiracies or whatever you want to get into there, the people that are regulating it are probably very much, in line with the compensations and rewards that come from the positive effects of increases of value. So look, at the end of the day, I'll have a conversation there and I'll say, but here's what we can control beyond a shadow of a doubt is if you own your own solar system and you produce your own energy, and if you have a battery backup system, none of that affects you one bit. It doesn't matter, right? What happens with the share price, what happens with this or that, none of it matters. So let's get back down to how I can help you with a better solution than where you currently find yourself. It's the same analogy, Joe. I mean, you can ask 100 people, would you rather own your home or rent your home? Right. And most people, I mean, 99 out of 100, and that one person that says no is probably just an avid Grant Cardone fan of like, don't, live where, rent where you live and own where other people rent. But look, the reality of it is 99% of people would rather own their home. Why would you not want to own your utilities to the greatest extent you possibly can? If you think about our bills and our costs in our life, these are the only things that we can't control. Right? You can largely control your cell phone bill, right? Stop upgrading your phone as frequently, shop another provider, go to a different option, right? It's not monopolistic. But your utilities, your water, your gas, your sewer, your electric, even your trash to some extent, like a lot of those things, you don't have as much of an option as to who you can do business with. And so, look, some things, gas, for example, if you're a gas, if you use gas heat, you probably can't get away from that company. You can maybe change out your systems and try to go to wood burning and do other things. But at least with electricity, you do have an option. You have a scenario that says, look, if I go solar, I can get rid of this, whoever they are, utility company, from the dangling of the carrot and the dollars that they're requiring that I pay them every month, because I can own this instead. And I've also found that the better I explain that to somebody, the more likely they might even be to say, hey, you know what? I don't even care if this costs me more. Right. I've made those comments before about how solar, from that perspective, is a much easier sale from a sale professional side of things, because it's just like, look, like, we're offering a solution that doesn't cost anybody anything in reality. We're just rediverting and redirecting funds that you're already allocating to something else. I think in many ways it's a lot harder to sell a car than it is to sell a solar system. Because sometimes you're trying to convince somebody like, hey, yeah, there's this car over here that's $50,000. It's right in your budget, but you sure you don't want to go look at the $70,000 one? Right. And that's where car sales gets a bad rep, because people are trying to upsell you on things that just isn't justifiable and, push you into something that you didn't want. That's not the case with solar. With solar, it's like, look, you use X amount of energy, let's produce X amount of energy, and let's have energy independence.
Right, right. And that's why having a proper and thorough discovery is so important, because uncovering those pain points and hot button issues, it's not going to be financial savings for everybody, right? The high electric bill, I mean, I don't know that anybody likes a high electric bill, but just the financial savings is not going to be everybody's motivator. Especially now, you're seeing battery storage get more and more popular. There are folks like myself that got into solar, or they have an interest in solar more for self-sufficiency, emergency preparedness reasons. So a lot of times the numbers of this don't even have to pencil out as far as the solar system being profitable. A lot of time it's just helping the prospect get to this end state that they already have in their mind of being self-sufficient, of being energy independent, and you can help them get there. Although, even if you're pitching solar with battery backup for self-sufficiency reasons, I still recommend do the kill the bill. Because even though the kill the bill may not be the emotional sale for the homeowner, it will help that homeowner justify to themselves, or maybe even justify to their spouse, why this is something that they ought to do, even if they end up with a slightly higher monthly payment for the first few years.
Yeah, and that's an important thing too. I mean, I normally will also explain, if somebody's really fixated. I had a meeting with a gentleman yesterday who, that was his goal as well, as he wanted backup power. That was his main focus. But I still had to go through this exact same exercise, because at the end of the day, when he sees the total contract price, I don't remember the exact number on this particular project, but I think we were looking at a system that had 3 Enphase 5P batteries, and it was a 14 kilowatt system or something like that. And I think it worked out to be somewhere around $60,000. I don't remember the exact number, but I still had to use the leverage, because look, $60,000 is still $60,000. And so I still wanted to go back to the kill the bill to help them understand, like, hey, look, over the next 25 years, even if you didn't do anything, this is how much you would have spent on your electricity, and which was more than the 60,000, right? Now, when you're looking at the payment comparisons, if you're the cash flow oriented buyer, I then also had to explain, look, you just got to understand, this is not apples to apples. We can't really compare the monthly payment of your utility company that's a monopoly, that doesn't provide you with backup. When you lose power, your family's in a tough position, to the solution that gives you energy independence. You own your power. You have secure power for all sorts of emergencies, indefinitely could operate off the grid. These are not apples to apples. So we can't say, hey, your average bill of $150 versus the solar payment of $250 is an appropriate comparison. However, given that, I can still explain that, hey, if you had a grid tie only solar solution with no batteries, these would be a lot more apples to apples immediately month one. But then I can also say, but hey, look here, your total investment for solar is this. Here's how much you would have spent in total on the utility company anyways. And you're getting solar with batteries for less than what you would have spent over the next 25 years or 15 years or whatever period of time you're showing, on electricity. So that area there does get a little bit harder to try to have that conversation, because you gotta trust that you're communicating that well, and that your prospect is following what you're saying, because this is apples to oranges. when you're comparing those types of solutions. But again, it goes back to what we've talked about before. It's like, look, people go out and buy $20,000, $25,000 generators and have to have fuel tanks installed and do all this sorts of stuff, not because it's economically advantageous whatsoever. I mean, it's $25,000, right? Or 20,000. I mean, there's no economic benefit to that, but there's incredible peace of mind and safety and comfort and security. And maybe there's a little bit of economic benefit of like, hey, your food doesn't spoil, or some other, maybe your business is able to continue to operate, because you still have power. But people do that emotionally. They do that because it's just feels like they want security and comfort, and they're willing to spend the money for it.
Yep. By the way, I see we have a comment that came in here, so I'll put this on the screen. Philip Gideon is asking, do you guys have any remote work from home positions open? So Philip, appreciate the engagement here. So for Solar Surge, we have a dealer network, which you all that have been following for a while know that we have a dealer network of qualified solar sales professionals that have access to sell projects virtually and then have them fulfilled and installed by the Solar Surge dealer network. The best place to start there would be to just take advantage of that free strategy call. So I'll put the link up on the screen here now. For anybody else out there who's watching, who's wondering the same thing, best thing is to do a free strategy call, chat with us, just to kind of find out where you are in your solar sales career, if it might make sense for you to onboard and work with us directly. Or for many of you, Solar Surge University is going to be the logical first step, because that actually allows you to kind of go through our full internal sales rep training process. It's been organized in an on-demand online course, so you can just take it at your own pace. And then once you've completed that, we know that you're fully qualified to be able to go live and have access to our Solar Surge dealer network. So that would be my advice there. But appreciate the comment. So, all right, we're about 22 minutes in now. So let me give you guys an example of what this might look like on a live call. And I like to share my screen here if I can get one of my browser windows.
Joe, while you're pulling that up here too, I just saw 2 more comments came in here on the YouTube channel as well from DD Yoder here. So just saying, remember crunching the numbers a few years ago, ultimately settled on a great situation that he converted to. He's in SoCal with Southern California Edison as the utility provider. And then he followed up with another comment. His bill went from about $250 to $350 a month. Let's just call it a $300 a month average, to a solar payment of about $207, and that's covering 120% of his energy. So yeah, I mean, a market like Southern California, or a lot of California, especially with the way energy rates are in California, that was a very, very, very common formula and scenario, especially under NEM1 and NEM2. Now with NEM3, that's shifted a little bit. You probably won't see the nearly $100 a month savings that this gentleman was seeing here. Or individual, I should say. I'm not quite sure if it was a man or woman, but you might not see quite that, but you still, energy prices are still egregiously high in California. And again, shocker, going to continue to rise, right? Like that's just the reality. They're going to keep going up. This isn't a conversation of like speculating, oh, they might go up. It's like, there is absolutely no question. Inflation, regardless of the times we're in today, inflation has always risen over time. Costs have always gone up over time. They might not have gone up as aggressively. And you might have certain years where it went up 20% and then it looks like it retracted. But in reality, it's not. It's still actually progressing up and to the right at the end of the day. So, even for Californians today with NEM3, I know we've seen a slowdown in business overall. But in reality, it still is a significantly better situation than sticking with the utility company. So glad for DD Yoder, glad that worked out exactly as we know here. And I can pretty much almost guarantee that's always going to be the case for almost any home that gets any decent amount of sun exposure. As long as you don't live in an area that you are incredibly surrounded by trees, the economics of solar will almost always be significantly better than the utility company.
That's correct. And even in California, right? Because now in California, in order to get the full value for your solar, you have to have your own battery storage. So you can consume at night as opposed to dumping it to the power company at the cheaper rate. But even with the extra cost of the battery in there, you still end up with what is typically like an even bill swap situation where your solar monthly payment matches your current electric bill. But then, Dan, this goes back to what you were talking about renting versus buying. Let's say you're paying $2,000 a month for rent, and you could buy a house with a mortgage at $2,000 a month. There's still an advantage to take that mortgage because you're building equity over time, and you have a fixed monthly payment, ideally, right? You have a fixed rate financing, you have a fixed monthly payment. So as everybody else's rent goes up 2 or 3 or 4% each year with inflation, your mortgage payment stays the same if you set up your financing properly. And so it's the same thing in solar. Even if there is no monthly savings in month one or in year one, the idea of locking in your monthly energy cost for the next 25 years, as opposed to letting your rate go up with inflation with everybody else, there's still a financial case to be made there. In fact, this is one of the slides that we'll show early on in the sales presentation. Now, I'm pulling this from the Aurora Solar software, but pretty much all of the good solar proposal tools have something like this, where we'll say like this: hey, Mr. Prospect, before we get into the details of the solar system, I just want to run some numbers with you here first. And so what this slide shows you is what your electric bill looks like today. We say we're at $180 a month in this example, and what it might look like 10 years from now at about $250 a month, 20 years from now, about $347 a month, and what the total cost would be over the lifetime of the system. Now, again, this is using a 4% escalation, which I believe, Dan, is spot on in terms of historical year-over-year retail electric price inflation. But if you're talking about just the past 2 or 3 years, it's been more like 10% year over year, right? And so I might say something like, Mr. Prospect, as you know, a lot of what's driving this is inflation. In fact, right now we're in a very, very high inflation environment. In fact, if I look at what's going on with your utility specifically, and I'm just going to use Florida Power and Light here as an example. Well, hey, electric rates in your area actually went up 10% compared to last year. And so my goal is to get you out of this, to get you out of this situation where you just have to keep paying a higher and higher rate and you never pay it off, and instead put you in a position where you can own the means of producing your own electricity. We can freeze the cost by setting up a low interest fixed rate financing. And then eventually you pay it off and you have free power. So that's what I'm going to show you today. So Dan, that's how I pitch it. I'll kick it back over to you.
Yeah, no, I do the exact same thing. The only thing that I'll do sometimes as well is like when we're referencing this type of slide is I'll explain again, look, I'm showing you a 25-year, or again, whatever time frame you're really selling on, right? We'll say 25 years. And the reason why 25 is because most of the equipment, solar panel, industry standard for warranties is 25 years. So we're talking about 25 years because that's what the assets of your equipment are warranted and protected for and guaranteed to produce over a 25-year period at total minimum. Other things to kind of add to that too, just because the warranty is 25 years, of course, doesn't mean the panels just suddenly year 26 are going to stop working. So I will explain that as well. Like, hey, we're just showing you this 25-year comparison. And then most inverters, Enphase, their standard inverter for the microinverters, or standard warranty for the microinverters, is 25 years. SolarEdge, I believe their standard is 12, but they have a 25-year extended warranty option as well. So that tends to be about industry average. So I'll explain this and I'll show this and I'll go through and just kind of show those numbers. But then a lot of, largely comes back to that 4% escalation conversation, because I'm trying to go back to, while I'm showing these numbers, part of that kill the bill of, again, this is historical data, right? This isn't time sensitive, relevant data to right now, today, what your bill is going to do, frankly, from year one being 2023 or 2024 into year two, 2025. Right? Because if you're actually seeing that cost go up by 10%, just simply hovering on year one and then hovering on year two doesn't actually show what the real implication of their cost increases would be. So sometimes I'll show that I have an Excel file that I use, where sometimes I'll show, hey, let's plug in 10%. Let's plug in 13.5%. Let's plug in 8%. What actually happens? Right? That's just a manual way that I can show somebody, hey, 4% is the historical. Let's hope we get back to 4%, as our trend. But right now we're peaking up here, and that peak is 10% or whatever is currently locally relevant to that home. So I do a lot of the exact same pitch there, Joe. That's the same economic justification, if you will, that I'm going through in this part of the presentation.
Cool. Cool. Now, Dan, you can probably remember back in the day when we were doing a lot of in-home sales, we actually would take a piece of Kill the Bill. We would actually have it laminated in the briefcase, right? Remember that, laminated in the briefcase?
Yep.
And, but the idea is you show them the numbers, but then you like drive it home. You make it more personal by like showing some kind of a local news article. Like if you have like a local newspaper to that city or a local news channel to that city, like showing, hey, this is the issue, right? This is how bad it is locally. But why do you think it's important to have that element of making it personal or making it local as opposed to just showing the pitch on the software?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, number one, look, I believe that people, generally speaking, are, good, more trustful people. But when it comes to sales interactions, I think they always believe that someone might be out to get them in some way. And so I don't hide from that by any stretch of the imagination. I might even make comments in my presentation that says something like, look, I know you don't really know me and I know you don't trust me. I'm going to call it out right away. But hey, let me show you something that I couldn't have fabricated. I couldn't have just made up. I couldn't have just plugged in. And the more stuff that I can show that reaffirms the fact that, hey, your trust level for me right now is like down here at the bottom. And I'm working to gain your trust during the sales process to the point at which you'll ultimately say, yes, I want to work with Dan, his company, and I'm going to sign this contract. But I'm not naive to the fact that I'm not just going to walk in here at trust level 0 and you're going to commit. You won't. So along the way, I'm trying to do things that's going to increase that trust and that rapport, and just them looking at me as like, hey, this person knows what they're talking about. I want to do business with this person. And so we'll use local publications. We'll use local media. We'll use, oftentimes, some of these utility companies make it even easier. They'll publish things themselves. And that's part of the benefit maybe to the regulated utilities, is that some of them are required to put out statements on certain things about what their forecasting cost to be. Most people, quite frankly, what I found when it comes to selling solar effectively and people's power bills, a lot of people, it's so out of sight, out of mind, that they're just used to having to pay the bill. They don't think about it, really. It's just like, oh, wait, you mean that I could possibly have a better option? They've just been so accustomed to it over the years. So I'll try to use reference points of things like that to explain and highlight, hey, here's a local publication. Here's something on your utility company's letterhead that's directly from them. Of course, I also have, references and people I've worked with that I can lean on and say, hey, can I pass along your information so you can talk to so-and-so and just kind of explain what your experience has been? And then I think the other one too, for me, I've talked about this. I know this isn't a separate podcast we did, Joe, too, but I'll just talk about the fact that I own a solar system and just say, look, like, I invested my own hard-earned dollars. Yes, this is my career, but I earned the money that I've worked hard for into this product because I believe in it. Here's my system. Right. And now it's like, I'm a customer just the same way you're a customer, right? Or a client. I have owned solar. So I try to resonate and have those different things click. And I heard somewhere along, I don't remember where it was. I think it was maybe just in like a psychology. I try to use 3 examples of things. 3 just kind of tends to be like the magic number of, if you can present 3 scenarios. So I'll show, hey, here's my system. That might be one form of me connecting and justifying with them. Here's a copy of a publication from a news article or the utility company. And here's your presentation of the numbers that I've looked at. So 3 different reference points to show them, what's going on.
That's good. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I've also seen, I can remember I did a proposal for a homeowner in Arizona not too long ago. And, I just did a quick Google search, for SRP. SRP was the utility company that was servicing them. And I just did a quick Google search for SRP rate increase 2023. And it took me to an article right on the utility's own website saying, yeah, we raised the rates 9.5% or whatever it was this year. So a lot of that third-party validation just goes to drive home what you're pitching in your presentation. Sometimes you can go straight to a government website. I know that the U.S. Department of Energy, they have a database where they track electric rate increases, and a lot of times those type of searches will take you right to a DOE website. And again, it's just giving that third-party validation that you're not making these numbers up. It really is this bad. this is really where the inflation has been historically. This is likely where it's going in the future. And we've got a better way, we've got a better way of doing it here.
Yeah. One of the things I do as well, Joe, just real quick to share my screen on this. This is the EIA's website, the Energy and Information Administration. So again, it's a .gov entity, and this is more so highlighting, and I think I've shown this before, but it's really highlighting what costs are right now today, right? So I'll come in here and I'll look at things like this. Right now is for the state of Virginia, but if I scroll down here to electricity rates, I can see in Virginia what is the current residential average, and then what is the U.S. average, right? And then I can jump around and look at different things, in different states as well as needed. So like this is a 15.21 cent, cost per kilowatt hour. I mean, I remember years ago, Joe, right, when we were doing in-home, the average cost was 10 cents, maybe 11 cents. And when I say years ago, I mean, we were only talking, 5 years ago that was the case. So costs have gone up pretty significantly, and you can do the percentage calculations on that as well to see what's happened. But this is a really good, helpful website. This is just EIA.gov. And then when you go in here, you can pull up and you can change, various states. Like if I wanted to look at costs in California, as an example, come in here, drop down the prices, and let's look at average, utility cost in California is about 31 cents, per kilowatt hour. And that's averaged out based upon peak, on peak, super on peak, off peak, all those different variables that some of the time of use providers have. Some states are more common for time of use energy rates. Other states, like here for me in Virginia, it's a very uncommon thing to have time of use. But anyway, that's a tool that I like to use just because I think it's helpful to show them like, look, this is a .gov resource that's being kept up to date. So again, just it's kind of social proofing, right? You're pointing back to different things that are realistic. They're irrefutable. They're not manipulated by a salesperson with bad intentions or lower levels of integrity. This is factual information. So, Joe, while we've been talking here, there's a couple of questions that have come in here. First one here from Jeffrey Holman. This is a good question too. Appraisers not adding value to homes with solar. This gives customer pause. How do I sell my home? Great question, because my experience as well has been that I have not yet seen where appraisers are really fully wrapping their heads around the calculations as to what this value of a solar system has. And I think the answer here a lot of times comes down to why it's important that you work with the right realtor that really knows how to try to sell the home properly and understands the value of solar. That would kind of be like if I did a major modification to my kitchen and I don't have the right realtor that knows how to really write the listing well and highlight this well and market it well. They might use certain words and terms that make it sound a lot more fancy than it is, but they just do a good job of presenting that. I've seen it before with a home in DC that I was working on before where a gentleman was selling it. It was a multi-million-dollar home with solar, and the realtor that was representing it really wrote the listing well to talk about the idea of like, hey, whoever owns this home is going to have total energy independence. They're going to be empowered. There was all these kind of like punch phrases that really allowed the person, I'm sure, that bought it to have this sense of morality, right? Of like, look, like, I'm independent. Right? This is why I'm willing to pay for this. And I don't think that was relying upon an appraiser to say that this is what the solar system is really truly worth, because the appraisers are used to looking at things and saying, okay, hey, this is what the cost of the equipment was. This is its useful life. This is what that equipment is worth. But they're not considering what that equipment is worth in terms of the alternative cost or the opportunity cost of what they would have been having to spend on the utility company, right? They're just looking at the asset itself and saying, okay, hey, it was bought for $50,000 5 years ago, 25-year warranty. Here's the straight line depreciation on that asset. This is what it's worth. But that itself isn't telling you what it's actually worth in terms of dollars saved to the person that owns it. And so that's, I think, where it's important that a realtor, and realtors are accustomed to these things, right? They're trying to get higher than market price values. They're factoring for appreciation on properties. It's a similar calculation for a realtor in many ways. They just need to understand the basic inputs to how solar works to figure out, hey, this is what this actually saves. So, Mr. New Buyer, when you buy this house for $20,000 more than the house for sale across the street or around the corner, what you're actually saving is you're buying this for $20,000 more to save yourself $70,000 more over the next 25 years, right? That's a $50,000 net benefit to you. This is actually a heck of a deal. I could stand to increase my price a little bit more, but that's kind of the justification. So I agree that the appraisers don't see it the same exact way. But I think, again, it's just work with the right realtor that knows how to sell the home properly, that has some knowledge of solar. I think that really would end up being more beneficial in that case.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Dan, 100%. If you're trying to sell a solar home, you need to work with a realtor that's got experience in how to market a solar home. Now, in California, there's many more of them out there. Texas is just kind of catching up. But frankly, Texas is number 2 in terms of solar capacity here in the country. And there is a real quantifiable benefit to the potential buyer of a solar home, right? We can say, look, typical homes in your area with this square footage, you're paying an electric bill of say $300 a month. The potential buyer of this home will not have an electric bill, or their bill will only be $100 a month. So there is a quantifiable amount of savings that having those solar panels on the roof. Now, I think the only area where you might get into some trouble here is maybe the solar system is malfunctioning and the original company that put it in is not in business, or they're not able to service it and keep that system healthy. Then you may have some other issues to work out. But for a solar system that's in proper working order, it should be a very, very easy justification or calculation to say, look, if I did not have solar turned on, I would be paying this a month in my electric. But because I have these solar panels, I'm saving X amount per month. And therefore, I'm confident asking in $10, $15, $20, $25,000 higher sale price, which the homeowner or the buyer will save, hopefully in mortgage payment, or whatever they pay slightly extra in mortgage payment will be offset by what they're saving on their electric bill. So it should not be a detriment to a potential buyer.
Exactly.
So, Dan, any other thoughts here? I see a couple more questions here from Mr. Holman. Let's see here. We can get
I
this
think
next one up.
the most recent one here. And look, I understand that part too. I'm definitely not a mortgage professional. I've, been around, surrounded by them in my family for quite some time. So I understand kind of the basics. I think part of what you're referring to here is if the appraiser writes the value of the home at a certain level, despite the fact that the realtor might be trying to sell at another level, some buyers might not qualify under DTI constraints or, debt to income constraints, or be able to, they might have to come out of pocket more money, directly because they can't take a loan because the mortgage company is not going to, let's say, for example, that house appraised at 300,000, but the realtor does a great job of selling this home with solar and they're trying to sell it for 330. Well, the mortgage company is not going to write the loan for 330. They're going to write the loan for up to the 300,000 because that's what it appraised for. At least it's my understanding of the basics of how that would work. So it would be then on the buyer that is, trying to get this home to come out of pocket that other 30K to make up the difference. That definitely could be a factor and could cause a problem for some people. But then there's also the other alternative scenario that was talked about here where you mentioned, either transfer or pay off. A vast majority, I can't say all because I don't know about every company out there and what loans they're offering, but I know that the loans that we've offered here at Solar Surge within the past, I think 2 to 3 years, almost all of them have transferability, capabilities where that loan, as long as the new buyer credit qualifies and meets the requirements of whoever that bank is, you have the ability to transfer that loan over and the new buyer of that home can just pick up from where the previous, owner left off. Not to mention, of course, the other part could be you work out some sort of deal in the sale process where there's a payoff of that loan. So the new buyer walks into no solar payment. So there's ways to kind of structure that and do things. It just depends on each scenario.
Yep. Well, Dan, I don't see any other. Let's see here. Looks like George may have a question. Might be more of a comment there. But what are some other areas, Dan, that you use as far as pulling in third-party validation to justify the solar proposal?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of them that I kept thinking about here too, just because we were sort of on that topic of resale and stuff, is there are a couple of different publications, and I did a quick just Google search while we were talking as well. It looks like there's been a handful of even more timely relevant conversations that have came out in the past. Seeing one here from Market Watch back on December 4th, September 14th, there was a Forbes article about home values and solar. And there's a handful of different studies that have been done and local markets that have determined, okay, well, what is the value impact and the value increase? Generally, what it seems from most of these is that across the board, it's about a 4.1% value increase for homes that have solar versus those that don't. So sometimes when I'm having this conversation, I have another separate calculator tool where effectively what you would do is you'd plug in whatever your current value or your estimated value of your home is today. And historically, home values increased by 3% per year. Now, I know in 2020 and 19 and 21, we saw just insane growth in a lot of different places, 20%, 25%. Some of them might even be over 30%. But if we take, again, that same conservative logic like we do with the 4% utility rate increase, and we just say, hey, if your home value increases by 3% per year, and hey, Joe, you've told me you're planning on possibly moving in 10 years. Well, let's look and see, like, does this investment make sense for you? Here's your current Zillow estimate on your property or what you think you can sell your home for at a 3% per year rate, increase to that value at year 10. This is now what that has become. And then let's go off the historical data we know of about a 4.1% increase. Let's add 4.1% to that value at year 10. This is what your home should sell for based on all the numbers and data we have at hand at that given time. And then you can kind of compare that to also, hey, what would your loan balance be on the solar system at that given time? Right. And you can kind of start crunching these numbers and looking at that. And again, if you pencil all that out, it's going to overwhelmingly make sense. So again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before of, look, the problem is that what I'll run in comparison to that is, hey, here's 10 years of your utility costs. Not to mention, you're not going to get any 4.1% value increase at the time of sale, right? And sure, maybe someone can try to make the argument that that's speculative, but in reality, there's data that supports otherwise, right? So I'm not just pulling that out. This is articles from Forbes, from Market Watch, from Zillow showing value increases. So I'll put those things side by side. And just explain a little more of that. And then it's just like, look, at the end of the day, too, 10 years of electrical cost at gosh knows what inflation factor, right? Because 4% is historical, but it doesn't mean it's going to be the case going forward. Here's how much you would have spent. So I'll do a lot of that comparison. That's when you're getting a little bit more into maybe that objection comes out more of, hey, I don't know if this makes sense or things of that sort, or if someone's a more financial, evaluator type person, I'll get into that a lot more too.
Great. Hey, Dan, I saw another comment here that this one is from George Hernandez, who raises an issue which I think is worth some discussion here. And was talking about the issue where the installer is no longer in business, which gives solar residential industry a bad name. If I just invested 60 to 85,000 and now I can't track down the maintenance provider, and then he follows up with, what should a homeowner do? So, George, this is a great question. And frankly, for you sales professionals out there, this is something that you're going to have to just acknowledge and be able to deal with, is the fact that there have been some bad actors that have come into solar, particularly in states like Texas. Texas and Florida were considered some of the hot solar markets over the past couple of years. And you did have a number of companies that came in, many of them from out of state. They came in, they sold a bunch of solar. They, in some cases, they got installed a bunch of solar kind of cheaply. And then a lot of these companies disappeared. Either they went into business or they just left the state, and leaving homeowners without proper warranty service. And I think this goes back to the issue that, Dan, you and I have spoken about many, many times on this channel, which is that just as important as getting the equipment right and getting the cost right, choosing the right contractor to partner with is the most important decision that you're going to make in this whole solar experience. Whether you're a homeowner choosing the right contractor to be your installer, or whether you're a sales professional or a dealer choosing the right contractor to partner with, because frankly, a lot of the contractors, and I'm hearing things from a lot of the folks out here in the industry, a lot of the contractors are stiffing the salespeople too. These contractors get into financial trouble, or they just decide that they're going to ghost, they're going to disappear. And not only are they not answering the phone for homeowners, but in many cases, they're not paying the commissions due to the salespeople. And then, if you have a sales business married to that contractor, that one failed relationship can put you right out of business. So I think it's so important that you really do view that choosing the right contractor relationship as the number one most important decision in your solar experience. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I feel like I've said this time and time again until I was, blue in the face, right? The expression, but like the reality of it is that is the number one most important first decision is what contractor you're going to work with. And I can speak for, our network here at Solar Surge at least. And this kind of goes back to those that are either on the sales side looking for some of these high quality partners and companies that they can do business with. Contact us about either the free strategy call or the dealer side, and let's just see what makes sense for you. But then also too, just from a sales perspective of the homeowners that we get the opportunity to work with, look, like the options we provide will not be the cheapest option. We try to tell people that always from the very beginning. And it's almost like it comes off as like, oh yeah, you're supposed to say that so you could justify how you're going to try to make a huge commission type of thing. And it's like, no, like absolutely genuinely, there's a reason why our partners offer the pricing that they do where they are. They're competitive, certainly, but they're not going to be the cheapest options out there. And you don't want the cheapest option because in the end, unless you have great do-it-yourself technical competencies where you want to be able to be the one that's willing to kind of roll the dice, you just want someone else to do the initial install and you'll deal with the repercussions and service type things later. Or unless you've got just phenomenal personal connections to other people around you that have the ability to do those things for you, you need to have a good contracting partner to make sure that you can they hang in there with you for the life of the solar system. And a lot of the partners that we have within the Solar Surge network today, bare minimum, been around for at least 10 years, have had great, proof of success and track record, and many of them thousands, if not tens of thousands of successful installs. That all that's really important. It's a huge part of it. And then obviously too, yeah, I've heard that story. Fortunately, to my knowledge, I've never been exposed to it. I don't think you ever have, and we have at Solar Surge, but some of the partners that don't pay commissions and don't pay their salespeople. And, unfortunately, the model that the industry has moved into due to some of the economic pressures in recent years is there's no advanced commissions. It's kind of become industry standard that, a solar sales professional or a solar sales, consulting business will design a system, sell that solution, with one of their install partners with the expectation that you're not going to get paid until the project's done. And there's a big risk that goes along with that, right? There's a big risk that you sell the project and they never pay you. And it does happen. I mean, there's a lot of sales, solar sales professional horror stories about that. So it's a really important part of just making sure you know who you're working with, that there's some validation to their experiences, to their technical competencies, to how they've worked with other either clients, homeowners, or solar sales businesses. So again, if you're someone that's tuned in here, because this is geared a little bit more towards sales training and sales professionals, if you're someone that's looking for that, schedule a free strategy call with us. Let's jump on, kind of see where you're at. We can point you in the right direction. Like Joe said in the earlier part of the training here, that might mean, hey, you're ready to go. Let's partner immediately and let's see how we can work together. Or that might be, hey, I'm getting into the industry, and the best first place for you to start is with Solar Surge University, which is the entire training program that we built. It's our 20 plus years of combined experience of training. And if you were to walk in the door today and I was to sit down with you for the next 1 to 2 weeks and go through a live training with you, that would be Solar Surge University. We just put it into a online consumable course where you can take it at your own pace. Because a lot of people that are getting into the industry are getting into the industry because they have other occupations, but they want to get into solar, or they're already in maybe a financial, services field, and they want to start offering solar. They just don't know how to do it. That's what Solar Surge University was intended for.
Yep, absolutely. So you can access all that at solarsurge.pro. Solarsurge.pro is our Solar Surge University site. That's for solar professionals. I did want to share a couple other solutions here, though, for George and any other homeowners that might be out there as far as things that they might do. So two companies that we've had a chance to work with on a few projects. One is Solar Insure. And so Solar Insure is a third-party solar warranty that a homeowner can purchase to prevent them or to protect them in the event of the situation that we were talking about, where the contractor that did the original installation, either they went out of business or they just left the state. They're not able to perform warranty service to keep the system healthy. Solar Insure offers a third-party warranty where they basically have a network of service providers that can come in and provide warranty service or maintenance repair service for your solar equipment in the event that the original installation contractor is not available. So go ahead and check out Solar Insure. If now, of course, this is something you would have to have purchased at the time of sale. So it's not necessarily something you can buy after the fact, to my knowledge. But if you're in that process of maybe considering or shopping for solar for your home, definitely consider bundling Solar Insure with your solar system, and ask your contractor, if they are a Solar Insure certified contractor. The other option that I want to mention, though, is the lease option. And so we're offering a lot of solar systems with the Sonova lease, especially in Florida right now. One advantage of the lease, beyond just getting a lower monthly payment, is the fact that the leasing company provides their own guarantee, basically their own production guarantee and their own warranty on top of the contractor. So again, in the unlikely event that the contractor who did the original installation goes out of business or maybe leaves the state or for whatever reason is not able to perform under the warranty, then the leasing company just goes out to another one of the contractors in its network and hires that company to make the repairs. So I think those are two practical steps that a homeowner can take if they want to protect themselves from contractor default, right? From the contractor not performing after the original install is done. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think those are two really good options. And I know the lease has become one that's been a lot more popular, also because of just the rising interest rate environment and associated fees with financing and things of that sort. The lease can prove to be pretty attractive for that reason, right? You're kind of protecting your downside in many different ways, where prior to this, maybe it wasn't as previously attractive. So two good scenarios for sure there. And again, just kind of depends on what you're looking for, right? Like what are your main considerations? And sometimes too, it's if you're working with and you've got very good trust because there's a history and a track record with that installer, that they're exactly the right partner, then maybe you don't need to explore these scenarios. But if you have any doubts, this would be a good consideration, either Solar Insure or a Sonova lease. Want to go real quick here, Joe, to a question that was commented as well as we get ready to sort of wrap up here. Enchanted Table Meadow had commented saying, I like to build a carport that would protect my car, tractor, etc. from the sun, snow, and most of the rain with only solar panels for the roof. Would the entire structure qualify for the rebate? I don't really know the proper answer to that one, unfortunately. And I think really you'd have to talk to a tax professional about that. But it would be my understanding that, from my base knowledge, you can't just build the structure and add solar to it with the intention of trying to claim the entire structure. But you could, claim the part of it that has the solar that goes on it specifically. So I don't know how that would apply, to a structure that does not currently exist that you're then building. Now, in theory, if you built a structure that you might see in some places, like I know there's a lot of them in California, Arizona, where they'll have solar panel structures above parking lots that provide shade and the ability for people at a grocery store to park under them. Well, that whole apparatus is part of the solar project, so I'm sure all of that would end up qualifying. But I don't know exactly in this particular case. Really, the right answer is you're going to have to talk to an accountant about that one to get proper tax guidance and legal guidance as far as that goes.
Right.
Let's see here. A couple other questions. George had asked a question here just real fast. Do you find homeowners are more particular about solar panels built in the U.S.? My experience, at least, Joe, to answer this question is that, there's kind of in certain niches or people that you interact with, right? They might be like, oh yeah, I want made in America. The simple reality today, though, guys, is that a vast majority of solar panels are not purely made in America. But that also goes for, I think, a vast majority of a lot of equipment out there in the world. There's very few things that are made specifically and only in one given country. It is a very global economy for a lot of things. Now, Q-Cells, right, is one of the ones that most recently, obviously we kind of kicked off with that, and we'll wrap up with that too. Has their Dalton, Georgia, manufacturing facilities and stuff. And I think you said, Joe, earlier about 12,000 panels made per day there. So that is something that I know for sure when I'm representing Q cells, I add a little additional, probably American pride in there with why I like offering Q cells because of the made in America, piece of it. So outside of that, though, I don't know. What are your thoughts to that as we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some brands out there that they market themselves. They kind of lead with that made in USA. Mission Solar comes to mind. They're a Texas-based solar panel company, and so I think they kind of lead
Right.
with that. That's part of like their company branding, like, hey, buy American. And I think that really does resonate well with a lot of the Texas market, right? They don't like the idea that, oh, we're sending money to China, right? Or we're sending money to maybe a potentially hostile country. But as a solar professional, I can look around and I see that there are quality solar panels that are made all over the world. Here in the U.S., the top brands that are manufactured here in the U.S., number one would be Q Cells. Silfab makes their panels in the USA. Of course, Mission Solar, we already mentioned them. And there's some smaller ones as well. But there's some great solar panels coming out of Singapore, coming out of Vietnam. I don't think as an industry professional and an engineering type person, I don't think that there's a significant difference in quality as far as a made in USA solar panel, whether one's coming from one of these other countries. But you do want to go with a good solid brand of solar panel with good performance specs and with frankly from a company with solid financials, so that you can have confidence that they'll be able to perform under their warranties. Because we have had solar panel companies go bankrupt too, or get into financial trouble as well, which kind of can leave you in a precarious situation as far as having any warranty claims paid out. So if you'd like more information on that, I would refer you guys to our top 5 solar panels going into 2024. We just published that video about a week and a half ago, where we break down what I consider to be the top 5 solar panels on the market. And of course, that's a report that we will continue to do throughout the year, because every year the technology changes. There's new products coming out, new brands coming out. And so that's a lot of why we are here at Solar Surge, is to make sure you have the most up-to-date industry and product information. But folks, that pretty much does it for our hour here. Again, we're here 3 p.m. Eastern time for 1 hour live sales training each week. And of course, we do the live stream so you can ask your questions and provide your comments in real time. And so we really appreciate you guys who have engaged in the conversation today. Dan, with that, I guess I'll let you close us out.
Yeah. Again, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back here again Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific for additional sales training. And I think I'm blanking on it now, Joe. I know we already had our planned topic of conversation. But anyway, we'll see you guys again next week. Thanks for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of your day.